Hi, everyone. I'm Mark Turner, the CEO of the Saskatoon Symphony Orchestra. My guest tonight is Leslie Dala, and we're here for Music Talk from McNally Robinson on Treaty 6 territory, homeland of the Métis. I'm absolutely thrilled to be back at McNally. It seems like it's been years and yet a blink of an eye. And what's cooler, last year when we were doing music talks from McNally, we were entirely alone. There was like 4 of us in the store. Tonight there are actually customers milling about, so that's very cool, and we're the only ones with our masks off. Les, welcome back to Saskatoon.
Thank you so much, Mark. It's my pleasure to be here.
I'm glad to have you here tonight because you were with us last season, but we don't do this for Pops concerts, and you were technically here for a Pops, although there was really it was kind of heavy duty classical stuff in the whole show. But I'm really grateful to have you back with us for opening week as well. It's a cool experience to have a full orchestra again.
I'm very honored and really excited because this is my 3rd time in Saskatoon, but first time with the whole orchestra. So,
this right, because you were here in 2015 for Madame Butterfly.
That's right.
With Saskatoon Opera, and then of course this past winter we had the reduced orchestra, and now we're back up to full forces. Have you conducted a full orchestra since the start of the pandemic yet?
Actually, yes. Surprisingly, in late July, I was hired to do Rachmaninoff's 3rd Piano Concerto with an incredible 16-year-old pianist based in Vancouver who's just moved to New York, who's in the Juilliard pre-collegiate program.
Oh wow, that's exciting.
That was exciting.
So this isn't even the full return for you. You've done this once before already. What was it like returning to full sound after the weirdness of the silence of pandemic?
I mean, beautiful. It just felt like such a gift too. It was with members of the Vancouver Opera Orchestra, whom I work with a lot, but they hadn't played together as a full band for almost 2 years in that case, because the last big show we did was in October of 2019, which was La Traviata, and then there was a production of Barber of Seville, but it's a smaller orchestra that doesn't have lots of the people who were involved in this, and there was just this feeling. Everybody felt so grateful to be there, and again to play a piece like Rachmaninoff, which is not what they play either. I mean, it's mostly an opera orchestra, but boy, everybody came so prepared, and the soloist was.
I think audience in the room will feel a bit strange too right now.
I think that's true. Mind you, as you say, there's really nothing like having people in the room. You really feel then you're communicating, you're sharing something, and there's a reciprocal energy that comes from the audience. Yeah. Which is very supportive. It can be a little bit daunting to, play for cameras and microphones only because it's not the human experience. So I'm very excited for that to be happening on Saturday, but I can imagine that everybody will be just a little bit apprehensive. It's almost like going on a first date again or something. How's this going to turn out? Am I doing the right thing? And, all of the things that we used to not think about very much at all are now suddenly it's a new thing.
It is, and I think it's going to be quite emotional for the audience. It's funny for those of us in the industry who it sort of kept going. We had concerts every 2 weeks, so we sort of kept going. I didn't realize how emotional I found music making even through a screen until just a couple of weeks ago when the Metropolitan Opera, of course, did Verdi's Requiem on the 20th anniversary of September 11th. And, I tuned into the live stream of that and found myself overwhelmed emotionally by the fact that people were on stage making music for humans, for people in the room. It just caught me right off guard.
Yeah, I saw that myself, and that was an incredibly powerful experience. I did a couple of concerts back in the day with their concertmaster Benjamin Bowman, and one of their choristers now was in a production of La Cenerentola, which we just did 2 years ago. Tyler Simpson, and I had the great honor of assisting Yannick Nézet-Séguin about 15 years ago on a production of Faust in Vancouver. So it was also kind of a beautiful thing to feel like, wow, like I know these humans, I've been in the same room, we've made music together, and in the most sort of, again, loaded is the word I can think of. You're right, it was the 20th anniversary of 9/11. There you are in New York. They haven't played together, all been in the same room, and with an audience of 3,600 people. it was, boy, that was just an incredible performance. I wrote to
stunning.
Yannick after and just said, this was, everybody put everything on the table, and it was so committed, so passionate, so beautiful.
And a great reminder of how exceptional a night with an orchestra can be.
Oh yeah,
and choir and soloists in full flight. It was very powerful. I'm thrilled that we get to kind of create that sort of energy on stage this weekend, because we purposefully looked to music this year that was that brought some joy to the audience, and so I'm really excited about that. You're from Vancouver. And I know you work with the Vancouver Bach Choir and the Vancouver Opera, and you're here in Saskatchewan. We're a little bit colder probably this week. Maybe.
Right now you're warmer. Actually,
well, okay,
it was
there you
raining
go.
and a little bit dark when I left. So I'm very happy. I just see sunshine.
That's true. We do have blue skies here almost all the time. So people from the West Coast do enjoy that. So this weekend we get things underway, and what I really enjoyed is you've bookended the concert with two Bernstein pieces, and when you suggested those, I was the happiest person in the world. Candide is like my favorite opera, and for the best of all possible reasons, and that overture is such an exciting way to start a return to stage.
It really is. It's almost like if you could put energy into a can or a bottle or something, and then just let it explode. That's what that piece is. All of 4 minutes long, 3.5, 4 minutes, but it just is such a great showpiece for everybody in the orchestra. You know, the percussion, the brass, the woodwinds, the strings, everybody, and it's so joyful and so buoyant and tricky for sure, and with all of these sort of asymmetrical things that just keep everybody on their toes, but it's what makes the piece so delicious.
And I'm trying to recall, it's in a challenging key, if I recall.
Well, E-flat major, which is, a great horn key and great for clarinets and stuff, but it's not the best string key ever. And boy, like, we were working this last night in the string rehearsal, and there's a lot of really things high up on the E string and a lot of things in octaves. So it's one has to really kind of be able to get around. So
yeah, it's such a fun opera. It's interesting because it's sort of composed almost at the same time as West Side Story. Like there's a lot of if I recall, like he stole some melodies from one to feed the other, and of course we've got a new West Side Story coming out. We end the evening with the overture from West Side Story. What do you find between those two Bernstein works? I mean, they're one is Candide is stupidly joyous.
Yep.
West Side Story is over dramatic. Is there what is it about Bernstein and the way he wrote this type of music that really speaks to people still?
I think he was just so instinctive with text, with drama, with situations. I know that the Candide, has so many different versions. And then he kept reworking it. Was never really happy with any particular one, but all of them have such brilliance in them. And again, to adopt that novel of Voltaire is, no small feat. And I know that was one of the things that we're always working on, the dramaturgical elements. But musically, it's so fantastic. West Side Story, you get, again, a kind of a modern reworking of Romeo and Juliet. And I know it was actually 10 years ago exactly that I got to conduct a production for Vancouver Opera of West Side Story. First time we did it. And I have to say that was one of the most fun experiences I've ever had, in that we had a couple of opera singers doing Tony and Maria, and then everybody else were triple threats. Mm-hmm. And I must say it was an incredibly humbling experience. The opera committed one extra week of rehearsal for all the dance numbers and things, and seeing the way the dancers gave everything, musicians, you do it a few times, you're like, oh, that was good, let's take a break. And these guys, we'd be doing America or the Act One finale over, and they're like, you could see the sweat pouring off everybody, like, okay, let's do it again. And they're like revving each other up, and I'm looking at everybody in the room going, where do they get the energy? I mean, it's just amazing. So it was very humbling, but it's so inspiring and joyful, and my God, that's such a great piece. And you're right, it's kind of crazy that it's this year that the film is coming out, the new version. And
at Christmas time, I think.
Yeah, that's right. Early December or mid-December. And that's also just a score that, again, you would know that it's by a classical composer because there's so much craft, there's so much structure, there's so much brilliance, but it doesn't read like one.
Right.
It's, again, it's like the best of Broadway and pop music, and so accessible in the good sense of the word, I would say.
Well, and Bernstein rode that line wonderfully of accessibility meets serious
high art.
Art.
Sure.
I think of like The Age of Anxiety, which is not accessible, which is not something an audience can just sit down and consume like Candide or West Side Story. It's high art. And so to be able to find that balance in his sound and in his craft is I think why we still love him today.
Absolutely.
It's phenomenal. We also, I like that you've paired right off the top Bernstein with Rossini, because I think the two of them would have gotten along fabulously. They both loved life.
Yeah.
And they both were able to find a bubbly sense of joy in their music. And they both just made people sing their faces off.
Yeah,
just
for
like,
sure.
Here you go.
For sure.
Sing. And so the overture in question is from L'Italiana, one of Rossini's operas, Italian Girl in Algiers. And it's just, it percolates with energy.
Yeah. Like you said, Rossini, there's so much joy. There's so much fun in it. There's almost a kind of mischievous air that permeates so much of his comedies. And I mean, when you read that he would be tossing these off in 3 weeks or something, I mean, it's simply staggering. No wonder he retired so young and moved off to Paris and became a culinary gourmet and threw parties. What you said at the beginning, I could just imagine, if we have time travel, Bernstein would have been a regular at Rossini's, smoking, chain smoking at the table and drinking, great Chiantis and just having,
it would have been great.
Yeah, for sure they would have gotten along.
They would have had a lot of fun, and I think the music, particularly between that Candide and Italian Girl, I think there's it's that suspicious energy.
Yeah,
something is about to happen. They're some of the best overtures ever written. The major piece on the program is the suite from Bizet's Carmen, or selections from the suite anyway, and it's such a great work. On stage as an opera, off stage as a orchestral suite. What is it that makes Carmen so unforgettable?
Certainly the music. The storyline is also, so compelling. I mean, it's the reason it I guess, failed when it did, playing at the l'Opéra de Comique, because they were used to Offenbach musicals, which were light, frivolous, just these...
And
then suddenly this story comes along and people get killed in it, and it's, very racy. And the situations are definitely, it's not a PG kind of piece. But the sheer genius of the writing, and the variety of the writing and the characterization, and the thrilling orchestration, you really, and that's the beautiful thing about the suite, is that you get distilled in 30 minutes or less some of the great highlights, and also an insight into what his melodic gift, his orchestration gift is, without the singers even. So this again puts the orchestra sort of on stage front and center with solos that they wouldn't ordinarily be playing to substitute for the voices.
Yeah, for the voice. And I mean, you're right, it is that writing style. I mean, Bizet was so young. Yeah. He was mid-30s when he was writing it, and I remember reading stories about how the orchestra thought there were parts of it that were unplayable, and that the chorus was furious that they weren't just like standing in rows singing, and they had to be people in costume smoking, and like they had to be characters on stage. And now that is the norm. That is, I mean, that's even how we do, Offenbach now. Like, we don't think of it as the way they used to at L'Opéra Comique. And so it's so exciting that kind of, it caused a major shift. And like you say, it wasn't popular when it first premiered. It was seen as a wreck. Gounod hated it. He hated it, which I just find fascinating. And then, if I'm not mistaken, it was like it was done on the day of Bizet's funeral, and then like France all of a sudden loved it, and the critics championed it, and thus became, because he died 3 months after the premiere.
Yeah,
it's an iconic moment. So there, I am a huge opera lover, and I say to people who aren't opera lovers, there's a lot of music in a lot of operas that you can probably fast forward through. That's, there's some dry spots in some operas. There really isn't in Carmen. All the music is exceptional. What do we hear in the suite? What do we capture from the suite?
So one of the fun things about the suite as well is that it's not the sort of chronological version of the story, although the very first thing you get is the Fate motif, which comes near the end of the prelude. And it is that kind of ominous theme, in the trombones and cello and the low bassoons. And it's right away this kind of thing that... put it this way: if Bizet lived 100 years later, he would have been John Williams or the equivalent. Again, that with a 4-note cell, it's like Jaws or something. He creates it. He creates it absolutely, with so little. Yeah. So you start off with that, so that it's this like, whoa, something's coming, like in West Side, now that we're throwing around all of these connections, because that's the other beautiful thing about this program. It has so many connections that some of them have actually just occurred to me in the last few days too, with like Ain't It a Pretty Night, which goes into Tonight, so textually and just a whole bunch of things. Anyways, you start with the Fate motif, and then you get into the basically what would be the overture at the end of the suite. So it's constantly going back and forth. You get the Seguedilla, very famous, of course, the Toreador song. You get the Habanera. And then you get also a couple of the interludes, which are also so gorgeous.
And like you say, they're John Williams of the opera of his time, because he sets a cinematic view in those little interludes.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's a lovely showcase piece for the orchestra. At some point, everybody gets to shine.
Yeah, and that's one of the reasons why it was such a great opener for this year, because we do have the full orchestra back on stage, and it does give people a chance to shine in music that was actually written for them. Last year, while streaming these reduced orchestras, all of a sudden the bassoon is covering not only principal bassoon part, but also second clarinet and fourth horn, and so now all of a sudden we get to hear these instruments in writing that actually does suit them so nicely. We also get to hear one of the arias, actually, from Carmen, which I'm really thrilled about. Our guest artist this weekend is coming home to Saskatoon after having been away now for over 2 years, I think. So Danica Loren grew up here in Saskatoon. She has starred with the orchestra a number of times. She's starred with the Saskatoon Opera as well. She grew up singing in the children's choir and Fireside Singers, and if you went to Holy Cross in the late 2000s, you remember all sorts of things that she got to do there as well in their musical theater. So she is actually singing a Michaela's aria, which I jokingly say is the moment in the opera when I like to go out for a drink, because so often I find that it's just like it's such an energy shift. Like there's all this passionate, sexy drama music while Carmen's on stage, and Don Jose is caught up in himself and caught up in the drama of it all. And Michaela comes out in Act 3 and sings this. I find it almost too pretty in moments to be part of Carmen, but it's a really touching moment.
Yeah, it's ravishingly beautiful, and the funny thing is, I think I've been involved in about 6 or 7 productions of Carmen since I started. It was the very, very first show I repped with Vancouver Opera, and last year I was supposed to open the 60th anniversary season conducting a new production of it, and of course then COVID hit, so it's delayed. I'm hoping it's coming back soon, but I was so looking forward to that. The crazy thing is that I remember some performances with incredible Carmens and Don Jose's, but you get to the curtain call and somehow it's Michaela who often gets the biggest applause, because again, she's only on stage twice. Once at the beginning for the duet, which is again also very beautiful and charming,
and also sort of simpler than the other dramatic.
Absolutely,
around her.
yeah. And you know, it's very naive in the setting, and then that's again, it's the perfect foil to then what happens. But that aria, which it does stop time. I can see what you're thinking about, you know, going out, you know, because you won't miss anything in the drama. It's one of those moments where in opera it really is about simply the mood shift.
And you could take it out, and the story keeps going without it.
But by having it in there, it gives yet another huge foil and contrast and depth to the piece. Yeah. So, and it really is such a beautiful aria.
It really is a stunning moment. Well, he had to give the soprano something. She was only on stage twice, so
there you go.
He had to give her something if she's going to wait backstage that long. It's a really beautiful moment to add inside our Carmen suite this weekend. Danica is on stage with us a couple of times. I think she starts with Je veux vivre.
That's right.
From Romeo and Juliet, which is a party piece for every soprano who sings it, and a party piece for the orchestra, and a stressful first few bars for every pianist who has to play it.
Yeah, that's true. Isn't it?
You know, it's I actually, when Danica first sang Je veux vivre, I was her pianist many years ago, and I remember her, you know, setting the book down on the piano and go, okay, sight read it, and it was like, oh yeah, sure, great, and then it's like, oh heck, this is actually not sight readable, these first couple of bars.
You better work out your fingering. That's my advice for those little shifty things. Yeah.
It's such a fun piece. Yeah. It's also I find it a bit strange in Massenet's Romeo and Juliet, just because it doesn't because it feels like a party piece.
Yeah, but it is exactly what it is in the in the play, that she's very excited and nervous about her first ball, and just saying, you know, everybody's like, they want to marry her off right away to, you know, Count Paris, and she's like, I just want to live, I just want to, you know, experience life. And boy, in those again 4.5 minutes of music making, you get the passion and the energy of youth. It really is. It's a thrilling piece, and as you say, a showpiece for any soprano that can sing.
Yeah, it is. It's such a good party piece, and so often it's a party piece not only because it showcases their voice, but it's a good sing.
Oh, it's a great sing.
You know, like it's and for people who don't work in the vocal world, that is a thing. You can when a composer really writes an aria well for the singer, fits the voice, and it does just that. Also on the program is a piece that you brought to Danica, and I'm so grateful you did. And it's by Ian Kusan, who is a Canadian composer, and he was actually involved in. This is a rewrite. This is a piece that's been added into an old opera. Tell us a little bit about. Well, it's now put into Louis Riel.
Yes.
Yeah.
So when Harry Summers and Mavor Moore wrote Louis Riel for this Canadian Centennial back in '67, there were a lot of things I think that they did that people wouldn't do now. Right. And so the opening of Act 3, in which it's a lullaby to a child, basically they appropriated a piece which was not theirs to take. So the piece, you know, was premiered in '67. I know it was done at the Kennedy Center. Then it didn't get done very often, and then suddenly I know I was at a performance that UBC Opera did a few years ago, and then of course the Canadian Opera Company for the 50th anniversary mounted a production. And you know, times have changed, and there's a lot more awareness of, you know, what is right and what is proper. And it was brought to the attention of the general director that, you know, Harry Summers had no right to use that piece. And so these conversations were happening, but the production was already in place, and it was too late. But you know, full credit to him. He recognized that they were in the wrong, and he wanted to make it right by commissioning Ian to write this lullaby. And the premiere, I think, was given by the NACO, and it was written for Melody Courage, who lives in Vancouver, with whom I've worked for many years on many shows. And she called me up a few weeks before and said, I'm going to be doing this with the NACO. Can we work on it? So I feel lucky that I was actually one of the first people to have a look at this. And I remember sitting down to play through it, and I thought, oh my God, this is so beautiful. Like just the harmonic language, the way, again, what you said, when something fits the voice, that's a real gift, because that not every composer can do that. And in fact, very few can. But Ian just really knew exactly how to set this. And not to say that it's simple, it's really not. But he honed into the kinds of things that can really also show a voice to its full expressive potential. And it's this stunning, it's a very, I would call it a very fragile sort of piece. So colorful, and again, showing off instruments like there's lots of solos for the flute, the harp, and the celesta. So to me, it has that very kind of French sound, like Debussy, and that kind of orchestration, lots of string harmonics. And it's just, again, such a beautiful piece. So when you said that, you're always looking for works by diverse composers, I thought, oh, this would be perfect. And this will be perfect for Danica. So I'm so glad that she agreed to look at it. And then you just told me beforehand too that she had a great conversation with Ian. And so I'm super excited to have her in the room to work on it. And
it's a like you say, it's not simple, but it has that simpleness, which is what makes it great to sing. And I remember the first time I heard it, which I think was Simone Osborne's performance that's on YouTube, thinking like, I want to hear an entire opera from Ian. And I also thought because it was such wonderfully dramatic music making in a sincere way, which is what makes great opera.
Yeah.
And I what I did love about it, like you say, A, we got someone to rewrite it. B, he's also a Métis composer, which I think means a lot, particularly here in Saskatchewan and Manitoba, where Louis Riel was such a dominant figure of our province's histories. And the opportunity to be able to give this piece a performance here in Saskatoon is really important. We are very close to Batoche. We are. It is part of our history that we don't really know enough about in Saskatoon, and so I think it's a really wonderful opportunity to showcase this beautiful music for me. And I know he is working on an opera, if I recall, for the COC, which I'm very excited about. And before we finish the rest of the program, I do want to ask, as an opera conductor, you do a lot of opera conducting. How important is it that we get a great Canadian opera or two in the next few years?
Very important, because let's face it, when we're looking back at the so-called sort of golden age of opera, whether from the beginnings with Monteverdi or Rossini, when you think how much those guys were writing, like just Donizetti, Rossini, Bellini alone, between the three of them wrote well over 100 operas in such a short amount of time. And it's because people's attitudes were, they wanted to hear, everything they heard was contemporary. They couldn't even, they couldn't probably have even reckoned with a Monteverdi opera, because everything was so much in the moment. They didn't have recordings. And I feel that we're very fortunate in the time that we live, because, in the day it was recordings, now it's like YouTube or something. If you want to hear music from sub-Sahara Africa, type it in anywhere in the world from any period. We have all of that. But at the same time, we've lost, I think, sometimes that curiosity for the creation of new work. And I have been involved in a number of new pieces, and there's really nothing like it when you get your librettist in the room, your composer in the room, the dramaturge, the people who are reading through it, and you're creating something new. And my goodness, we have so many great Canadian singers and so many great Canadian composers. And my wish for them is that, that they do get the chance to have the opportunity to write for opera, because I don't know one composer who wouldn't love to write an opera.
Right.
But of course, it is the most expensive art form. It's so huge. The days of tossing off a piece in 2 weeks are gone, because of course in those days too, those pieces all had very, very tight structures. Yes. The librettos weren't all often carefully thought through. And now, you live and die by what you produce, because you know that it's going to be around forever because of things like YouTube or the internet. So everything that people have to create now, it's I mean, imagine how Brahms felt when he wrote his first symphony after, Schumann said, "You're the next Beethoven," and he's like, "What?" And now it's like everybody has to feel that way about everything they write because they compare themselves to, everything that's come before. So
well, and we really are in a golden age, I think, of Canadian composers.
Yes.
People talk about the 50s and 60s. I think right now that the composition coming out of Canadian composers is world class isn't quite accurate, because it is some of the top composing in the world, and it's I really hope that some great big operas come out of it. There's a lot of smaller operas.
Yep.
There's of course Philomena, and there's great examples, but in this golden era, we should be able to churn out a couple of really big operas that have some impact emotionally, societally, tell stories that need to get told. Particularly, I think in where Canada is at in its history, and so I'm really looking forward to that. And I'm grateful to those of you who do work in these opera companies who do actually start to tell those stories. And we've seen a lot of that happening in Canada with orchestras, and it's exciting. These are exciting times to have these composers creating in. So I'm really, really excited about that. You are able at home to write in your questions in the comments. So please feel free to. Megan is zooming them off to me. We will get to them before the end of the talk. There is two more pieces that we should talk about on the program this weekend. The first, Michael Swan, our own concertmaster, steps to the front of the stage and actually gets to perform the Meditation from Thais. Heart-stopping, beautiful music that is timeless and comes from an opera most people never see.
Yeah, that's very true. And it's, again, a grand opera.
Huge, if I recall.
Huge. I mean, I think I know that the Met did one for Renee Fleming, what 10, 15 years ago, which is probably still up, that production. I don't know how often they bring it back. But again, a story with a kind of mythological libretto, and the music is again so rich, so luxurious, and that piece is something that's so familiar to people because it's been used in so many contexts, but so lyrical and so beautiful. And I think I had suggested it because I thought it would be great also to showcase somebody from the orchestra. And then once we got into the specifics of the programming, and Danica, and I'm sure this is what you're going to mention, but there's Carlisle Floyd's from his opera Susanna. She's going to sing the aria Ain't It a Pretty Night. And then I thought, okay, well, Ian's piece is very, very reflective. Ain't It a Pretty Night gets very big and dramatic, but most of it is also almost lullaby-like. And I thought, let's create a little triptych. And I thought, the Thais meditation would be perfect in between. That'll give Danica just a short little pause. But so in this,
I think she goes to change a dress. Actually.
Oh, does she?
I think that's
how exciting! Oh,
new dress, new jewelry.
So stay tuned on for the YouTube. But yeah. But it's so we've got really a kind of high energy program. But I love, again, in an evening, there's always that 2/3 point, and it can either, like you said, it's in Carmen. That's exactly where the Michaela aria comes. So I thought, well, as we kind of veer towards the end in West Side Story, let's put on the brakes and do a little set that's much more reflective. And beautiful, three very different pieces, but they share in common this kind of mood. Yeah. So we've got that before we finally then send people, clapping and dancing at home. With
and it's funny, Ain't It a Pretty Night is one of those pieces that I'm baffled that isn't more popular in the general music lovers realm, because it is one of the most stunning moments in American operatic history, and again, like Ian's aria, like Jeudi, it comes with a simplicity to it, and with such immense character development happening right there in the aria, and I think that's such an exciting thing. Have you gotten to do Susanna before?
Actually, yeah. Vancouver Opera did a production back in the late 90s. It was my second year, I think, on staff, and I was repping it, and I have very fond memories. It was a great cast, and there's a lot of parts in it, so it was virtually an all-Canadian cast. And it was a discovery piece. I mean, again, a piece that you sort of know by title, but rarely, play through from beginning to end.
And most people just know "Ain't It a Pretty Night."
Right.
Yeah.
Or the trees on the mountain,
yes.
Or the Olin Blitz aria or something.
Yeah.
But no, it's great. I mean, it again has that kind of feel of almost like an American musical, except again, it's like high art meets accessibility.
Yeah. And he's written in other operas, but really never anything the success of Susanna.
Nothing quite the same. It's true. The Mice and Men, I think, comes close, and he's still writing. I think he's 94.
He is, yes.
And actually,
we had to get written permission from him to be able to stream the aria.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah. The publisher actually needed to. They said, we're going to reach out to Mr. Floyd, and I was like, oh my God. Okay, sure, you do that.
Yeah.
But he is still composing.
Yeah. Do you know, actually, just a couple of weeks ago, I think it was one of Ben Heppner's last weekends as host of Saturday Afternoon at the Opera, and he was interviewing Jake Heggie, and he asked him about, what do you think in terms of America's contribution to opera? Like, what do you think is going to stand the, test of time? And he said, oh, that's easy. He said, Carlisle Floyd. He said, for me, Carlisle Floyd is an example of a composer whose operas will be around forever. Yeah. And I thought that was a really great tribute from a guy who was actually
writing his own operas.
And I believe, even a few years ago, Dead Man Walking was the most produced piece of something like, it has already received 50 productions worldwide.
Yeah, and it's only, 10 years old?
Yeah, a little more.
Yeah. 10, 12, 15. Yeah, like it's not, I wouldn't think it's even 15 yet. So it's pretty amazing in Ain't It a Pretty Night, it is Susanna, and the character has gone through, she has a challenging life.
Yeah.
She has a challenging life. She lives in a challenging town. She kind of like Carmen it doesn't really fit where she's placed, because she doesn't want to fit where she's placed, and all of that gets poured into this aria. Her desire to leave behind, to see what's beyond the mountains, and it's such a beautiful moment, and I think it's such a poignant moment to put at the end of this show, because it does give I think, as much fun and as much joy as it is to hear the orchestra in full flight and to experience that legitimate sound, big sound, I think I think it's the hard part of the evening is it is going to be emotional for a lot of us. For all of us on stage, backstage, in the audience, we've all gone through a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. And I really believe that, the human voice is the greatest instrument of all, and all instrumentalists aim to emulate what a singer can do. And, when somebody is firing on all cylinders, you get shivers in a way that, it's indescribable. And again, we talked about it, the Verdi Requiem gave us shivers, but being in the room with that sound is a whole other kind of physical presence of sound. And
I think it's so important in the months, years to come, as we kind of get out of the pandemic or go through the rest of the pandemic. I don't think we're anywhere out of, but I think as we live through this next section, and as collectively, I think particularly classical music has a really important role to play, because it is big emotions, big music to match that, and it has that ability to be overwhelming but also cathartic for the audience, and I think that's what I'm most excited about in experiencing not just this weekend, but throughout music making and the year and years ahead, is this reminder of we've all lived through this strange stress. They're still living through this strange stress, but other emotions actually need to be pulled to the surface, and music can do that.
Music can absolutely do that. And again, since Bernstein is opening and closing the show, there was that very powerful quote. I think it was in relation to the assassination of JFK, when the world was completely in turmoil, and he said the answer of the artists is to make music and art more passionately, more profoundly, as if you're putting everything, your whole life, and that's really what it is all about.
It really is. Yeah, it really is. We're going to turn our attention over to questions that are coming in, and I've got a few already.
Oh my goodness!
So, and this is a really good one, because it actually addresses your work inside this bizarre music making time of the pandemic. What skills as a conductor have you had to either newly forge or hone in working with musicians in a pandemic? I know from working with all of the conductors last year, having the mask on is a challenge. Conductors do so much with their face, and can give cues and can give, and so now, have you found yourself living more in your eyes than ever before?
Well, funny you say that. I've often said, and I really believe that actually the eyes, because when you think about it, I mean, people look at the stick or the hands or whatever, but people look at one's face. So I always try and really be in the music in myself, and I hope that it communicates through the eyes. So especially with wearing a mask when everything else is cut off and people can't see your smile or whatever, then it becomes that much more important. So there's definitely that. I know that this past year too, I was involved in a number of digital opera productions, very small things, but everybody in the room was masked up. And one of the things that was quite amazing to me was how much you can still communicate. And for some of the filmings, it was the sort of thing where the singers always had to be in masks except for the actual, live capture or filmed capture. And I kept saying to them, look, like, I'm going to be at you for your diction, because believe me, if it's clear through the mask, it's going to be 3D. And it really actually was a great exercise in that sense, because and again, from what I was doing too, it really makes you then hone in on what's very important and how much you can communicate. So it became almost an exercise in minimalism, right. But which is a good thing. Yes. And there's a lot of things I learned in the past year that I'm going to carry on using.
I know some singers who discovered how much jaw tension they really hold,
right,
because of the mask.
Yeah. And
all of a sudden they're feeling muscles in their face that aren't usually engaged, and they're going, oh wait, I'm holding tension there that I didn't know I had. It's a pretty neat. Do you have one of the questions that's come in, do you have your most proud moment of music making during this pandemic? Ooh. You released an album.
Oh, I did actually. Yeah,
it's a phenomenal album.
Oh, you're so nice.
It really is. I've played it on my radio show. It's just such a great. It's such a wonderfully intimate piano recording.
Oh, I appreciate that a lot. That was, again, if COVID hadn't happened, I'm not sure that would have happened. And it was simply because all of the things that were scheduled, the weeks of rehearsal for this opera or that or whatever, suddenly were not happening. So I started life as a pianist. I mean, I played the organ and violin as a kid too, but the piano was what I kind of carried on with. And I discovered these pieces, and I thought, well, I can learn these, and I grew to really love them. And I thought, well, as far as I know, I might be wrong on this, but I don't think another Canadian pianist had recorded them. So I got it into my head that, well, I'd like to do that. And it was a birthday present to myself as well. So, and that particular project is turning into a dance piece, right, with an amazing choreographer that I've been working with by the name of Idan Cohen, who is originally from Israel, who relocated to Vancouver a few years ago. And he and I actually are also going to be opening Vancouver Opera Season, which was just announced a week ago, with a brand new production of Gluck's Orfeo ed Erudice. And Idan has been workshopping this. We've been working on that together as well. And I just think he's is such a visionary. He's so brilliant. Does things that are so highly original, and yet they seem so simple and beautiful. So that was one thing that, again, COVID, this wouldn't have happened, I think, without that. So,
and this is a good segue actually into one of the questions that's come in. Has the pandemic changed how you think about community?
Well, I'll say this: it's made it that much more apparent, like, what a gift it is to be able to be a musician, but it doesn't have the same weight when you don't have people that you can communicate with. So it made me realize, like, I'm never going to take a rehearsal for granted again, even never mind a show, but just to be in the same room, because it is so powerful to be able to come together. This is what we were talking about just a few minutes ago, the power of the arts. It really, for those who, have never played an instrument or have never been in a theater piece, or, shared the common goal of putting together a piece of art, there really is nothing like it. Yeah. Everybody has to be very vulnerable. Everybody has to trust each other. Everybody has to be very supportive of each other. And through that process, we learn so much about ourselves, and we really are given such a gift. And so, having had a lot of the usual ways of doing that temporarily suspended, it made me just realize, like, I don't even know what else I would do with my life.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, you're right. There's a special sense of community when you make music or make something on stage together. That the alchemy of that, it's a collective jumping off a cliff, and I think there's a unique sense of trust and a unique sense of bonding that music, I don't think any of us will take for granted again. Was it with less productions, less performances, less time on stage, less rehearsals, like you were saying? Is it hard now to prepare for performing? I know, we're hearing from particularly some very famous international superstar artists saying they're finding it hard going back to the schedule, to the travel schedule. They're finding it difficult to go back now that their muscles aren't quite what they used to be. From a conducting perspective, what is it like? I mean, I know our musicians, there's such an energy of excitement to be able to actually make music again. And I'm sure that's the same for conductors. But does it change how you prepare?
Oh, I mean, excellent question. I find that with conducting, it's mostly in one's head. Right. So, you still spend the same amount of time studying, preparing. The difference being that now you get, the payoff of actually then having, people in the room. For one example, with the Bach Choir, last year was the 90th anniversary, and we had programmed both the Beethoven Missa Solemnis and the Bach B minor Mass. So it was going to be this epic, and Barbara Kroll's Miziwe, we were going to give the Western Canadian premiere. So that all got put on hold, and we had to find a way to continue working in some way. So by the time March rolled around, we had the permission to have our professional vocal section leaders in a room with myself. So we had 6 singers, 1 hour apart, rehearsing the Bach B minor Mass with everybody else at home on Zoom singing along, but on mute, right? So this was also, we spent 8 weeks doing that, like 8 Tuesday evening rehearsals. And on the one hand, I would say it was a way of also kind of digging in that we wouldn't have been able to do ordinarily, and we've reprogrammed it for this April on Easter weekend. And I, fingers crossed that it still goes ahead. But having, again, that was also a gift in a certain way, although it would have been great to be able to do it right away. We did what we could under the circumstances. So since we couldn't have 70, 80 people in the room together, well, we had a small group and we just worked it in a different way. So I felt very lucky because I was still doing what I get to do, but just approaching it in a completely different way, which is almost under a microscope. And for a piece like that, believe me, you can never put a piece like that under a microscope enough. No. And it's a piece that one never stops, learning more about and absorbing the layers. So. Yeah.
One last question, which I think is great, and I hope we get to ask it of every conductor all year. What advice or insight do you have to share with a conductor who's starting their career? What a job you have. It's so unique. It's so I often think roles of conductor and even senior leadership in orchestras, opera. There's so few of us really in the grand scheme of the world compared to accountants or doctors or nurses. Right. What insights do you want to be able to share with this next generation who thankfully seem to be ready to break down all sorts of barriers and move the industry forward?
Yeah, absolutely. Is that ever true? I would say be passionate, be curious, be a great listener. Those are really, I think, the most important things. Be willing to work super, super hard, and be as inclusive in every sense of the word. I had a piano teacher who I remember once in a class said, he just gave us the advice that try not to be too exclusive about your taste. Don't say that I don't like this style of music or I don't like this composer, because you're always just limiting yourself. You're putting up walls. And I would say in the world of music making, like you said, I mean, right now we're all about tearing down all the walls. And in music, there really shouldn't be any. So I think there's no shortage. One should read as much as possible, to study art history as much as possible, history as much as possible, because when one makes music, and then when you are fortunate, and it's a humbling thing to be in front of other people, you really want to be able to make every connection with the particular piece you're doing, with everybody in the room, and with how that piece is connected to us as human beings. And believe me, there's no shortage of that. So I feel like I'm just starting in terms of the learning. And I've been doing this now for about 25 years, but it is that kind of thing. The more you learn, the more you just feel like you're an absolute beginner. So I think if one embraces that and is not afraid of that, then you're gonna do a great job.
That's awesome. Les, thank you so much for being here, not only tonight, but here with us all week.
It's my pleasure. I'm so excited.
So thrilled. This weekend, you can actually join the Saskatoon Symphony Orchestra in person at TCU Place. Of course, there are lots of protocols put in place, lots of hand sanitizing stations, lots of distancing available in the lobby, extra airflow in the building itself and in the hall itself, and of course, the proof of vaccination at the door with your ticket and photo ID. And you can also join us online at concertstream.tv. It streams live. Again, it's exciting for us to be back streaming live after doing 16 or 17 productions last year. And so it's going to be a lot of fun. We hope you can join us this weekend. Thank you so much. Thank you, Les.
Thank you so much.
And thanks to everyone here at McNally Robinson. If you need some books, come here. They're the best in town. Thanks.
Boy, you're good, man. You just roll from one thing to another.
It just seems to work out. Good. I don't know why.